I have a friend who, even now, decades after graduating, still has these stress dreams. Whenever life gets tough, they dream they're back in school, about to take the Gaokao.
That's incredibly common. And it points to something much deeper than just a bad memory.
Right, and that's what we're getting into today. We're doing a deep dive into sources that look at the potentially irreversible neurological changes from that kind of high-pressure education.
We're talking about a structural imprint. This isn't just psychological. Using neuroscientific data, we can see how more than a decade of that stress literally reshapes the brain's reward system, its stress response, and even how you see yourself. For the people who go through this, these are permanent shifts.
To really get the scale of it, our sources have these anecdotes from the most intense regions. They call them the Sanhe 4 provinces. And some of the details are they're shocking.
Oh, absolutely.
Girls being told they could only bathe once every 2 weeks because, proper hygiene was seen as a waste of study time.
And bathroom breaks limited to 5 minutes, max.
For anything. And if you broke a rule, the punishments were, well, psychologically brutal.
They used public shaming, big character posters calling students scoundrels, and then came the mandated social isolation.
Mandated. So the school would enforce it.
Yes, it was official policy.
So you have constant pressure, no security, no sleep. Our sources make this incredible comparison. They say the mental damage is comparable to what's seen in chronic war zones or long-term domestic abuse.
It sounds extreme, but they're pointing to the long-term effect of that chronic cortisol exposure.
So it's not the experience itself, but the biological outcome on the brain.
Exactly. Because this is happening during that critical high-speed development phase. The impact is physical. It alters the brain's hardware. For instance, the amygdala, the part that handles fear and shame, it essentially gets enlarged. It becomes this hypersensitive alarm system.
Okay, so let's track that. How does the structural damage lead to personality changes? Our sources call them the permanent sins of the system. The first one is obedience training.
Right. You get this high estimation of authority, the teacher knows everything, but a dangerously low estimation of your own power.
But wait, that seems completely backward. If you succeed in a system that hard, shouldn't you feel incredibly capable? How does that lead to self-doubt?
Because the driving mechanism is chronic fear. That overactive amygdala means you are constantly anxious about being judged, about failing. It's a classic case of what we call learned helplessness. You might be strong enough to break the rope, but you're psychologically tied to the stake.
And I imagine that leads right into the second sin they identify, impaired judgment.
It does. It creates a paradox. You have someone who is brilliant at logical deduction on a test.
But they completely freeze when they have to make a big life decision, something with risk and uncertainty.
Exactly. Because the system never trained them for logic. It trained them for one thing and one thing only: risk aversion. The neural pathway that gets reinforced over and over is focused on not making a mistake. The pain of failure is so much greater than any joy from exploration.
Which means you can't handle uncertainty.
You can't. It feels like a threat.
This brings us to the third one, and it feels like the most tragic: emotional disorder. Our sources describe it as an inability to even perceive happiness, that feeling of, what's the point? It's all meaningless.
And that numbness comes from a couple of places. First, you've suppressed your emotions for years to get stable scores, which just overloads the prefrontal cortex. But second, and this is the key psychological reversal, anxiety becomes your safety zone.
Your safety zone? How can anxiety feel safe?
Because the alternative is worse. If you try to relax, your brain's self-network, what we call the DMN, doesn't go into quiet reflection. It immediately flips to intense self-criticism, shame. It starts screaming, you're wasting time, you're falling behind.
So staying busy and anxious is actually less painful than facing that inner voice.
It's a defense mechanism.
So if you put it all together, the risk aversion, the need for external rules, the ultimate result has to be what the sources call shrunken imagination.
It has to be. The future stops being this open space of possibility. It's not something you imagine. It's a narrow mechanical task that was assigned to you years ago. Get the good score, the good university, the good job, execute the order.
Which makes you think, if this system puts a kind of psychological tightening hoop on the heads of millions, like the one on the Monkey King, if it conditions them to follow a script and fear their own freedom, will those people ever feel like they can truly use their free will to evolve beyond it? That's something to consider as you process this deep dive.